TNKR Media.
Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal, showcasing stories from outstanding business people in Quebec by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton of FL Fuller Landau. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Excellent, thanks.
Show number 2 of what used to be called Today's Entrepreneur. Again, 14th season now. Thanks very much for going along with the Inspiring Entrepreneurs rebrand.
You know, it's a great city. There's an awful lot of great companies and a lot of inspirational stories. So, you know, I don't want to say it's my obligation to continue, because it's certainly more than that. But we're never short of stories and never short of guests. And I think today we've got another great example of how strong and how vibrant the youthful tech community is here in Montreal.
Yeah, so we're going from last week, we had one of the oldest businesses around, really, to Heyday. They're a brand new business. They were bought out by HootSuite recently, HootSuite being the social media management company, but Heyday is the AI chatbot for retail organizations. So if you deal with a chatbot online, like an FAQ chatbot, this is the more humanistic way to approach chatbots. And so that is on the way with Etienne, the founder of Heyday. Last week on the program, Canada's oldest family business, Mike. If you missed the episode, you got to check out Peter Simons of Simons. Really interesting program. I mean, they go obviously way back. It's a very, very established business. And out of all of our entrepreneurs, Mike, I can't recall anyone mentioning luck as their one piece of advice, for inspiring entrepreneurs. What do you make of the role of luck? I just wanted your thoughts on that, because I thought that was such a different thing that Peter Simons really takes some time to contemplate how lucky he is.
Yeah, I think you can take luck in a couple of different directions here. I mean, if you want to take luck in the sense of I succeeded because I was lucky, you can go with that. The hard work. It's amazing how lucky you get when you work hard. I mean, you can take it in that direction. Or my dad's old line: I'd rather be lucky than good any day. So I'll take that. You can also look at it the other way, and when you use the term lucky, is the byproduct of working in an environment that has created what Montreal or Canada or Quebec is, and we are lucky. We are lucky to be in an environment that is, that is capitalism with a conscience, more so than many other countries.
Yeah, indeed. It's not only luck, but how do you capitalize on the luck too and make the most of your time here as an entrepreneur? Let's start there actually today with the thing that's called, it's called ESG investing. It's called the triple bottom line. Basically, it's being a socially conscious entrepreneur. So this is something that has to be, in my view, Mike, part of the business model. Is that what you're seeing as well? That that the triple bottom line is something that's baked into companies more and more now?
Yeah. So for those of you that are looking for us today to come up with what exactly that formula is, I'm going to disappoint you and tell you there isn't one yet. This is a moving target, and I found a great line from John Elkington, who's part of the Harvard Business Review, and it says the triple line wasn't designed to be an accounting tool. It was proposed to provoke deeper thinking about capitalism and its future. And when you get into the triple bottom line, I think you get into an interesting Venn diagram where you would take people, planet, and prosperity, or capitalism or profit, and you've got an overlapping piece in the center. And how do they live together? How do we find a way to create? There's no doubt that you can't have employment, you can't have jobs unless you've got some profit and some money left at the end of the day. So the older capitalist approach is going to say, hey, without us and without the bottom line, all the rest of the stuff is hot air. The people are going to look at you and say, and we're living this in Montreal as we are around the world right now, people are going to look at you and say, hey, you don't take care of us as people. You have nobody, Mr. Capitalist, in order to do the work that needs to be done to create the profitability. And oh, by the way, in the meantime, all of that's wrapped up in an environment that has to be taken into consideration as to what are our effects short-term, long-term, and how are we either hurting or trying to fix some of the things that we've done in the last little while. So this triple bottom line is not a number crunching accountant approach to things, but rather, as John Elkington said, a deeper thinking about profitability and capitalism.
So the triple bottom line being people, planet, and prosperity.
100%. And those and the biggest element is not each one of those in isolation, but the biggest element is that point where they all intersect. And how do you find a way to make that a win-win for all three of those categories?
Is there going to be a metric developed in the years to come that will at least bring these activities into something that entrepreneurs can devote resources to, just a clear way to gauge whether or not you're hitting all those points?
We're hoping so. I mean, we're certainly not there yet. Our guest today talks about AI, so maybe AI will come up with a way for us to determine how we link all of that together. But really, I mean, you've got to look at a number of things. One, you've got to look at today's impact. You've got to look at discounting, present value of future profits expected by a given period of time. I mean, you can take all the financial models and bring it back. But how do you measure the success of what's going on a planet? And how do you, as a business owner, measure your success and define that into a bottom line? In my opinion, I think it's how we're going to measure this, Dan, is going to ultimately be we are going to have different bottom lines with a different goal and a different objective to meet. And you're either going to, like you do now with profit, you're either going to succeed, you're going to fail, or you're going to be right on budget. Well, ultimately, we're going to have some kind of measurement that's going to have the same thing when it comes to, succeeding, failing, or being just on budget for people and for the environment.
And speaking of socially conscious investing, Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, he has some Quebecois background, so it's a brand that's very close, that's appreciated by Quebecers too. And they basically decided they're going to give away their entire company. They set up a trust and a nonprofit organization to basically deal with all the profits. Obviously, that's an extremely generous situation. We were talking about succession last week on the show, Mike. So that's a bit of an extreme succession plan. But there's one model to follow, right? Just saying no to profits. That I'm sure will please a lot of people of my generation.
I'm not even going to try and get inside of Mr. Chouinard's head on this one because, you're taking a $3 billion company, putting it into a specially designed trust and a nonprofit organization that's going to be focused on combating climate change and protecting undeveloped land around the globe. Just as that was a mouthful, it's the whole concept is an entire thought-provoking environment of what exactly is this? I mean, some people, and I've read his purpose, but I've also read a number of commentary, and people have gone from he's a philanthropist to he's an opportunist to he's a he's a mercenary because of the tax save. I mean, I could come up with 100 different reasons why people are thinking he's doing it, and it would be very interesting, I guess. It would be great to get him on the show, Marjorie. It'd be really good to get inside his head in terms of what's provoking this long-term scenario. I mean, he's a man who's always had a huge love for the outdoors. He began climbing, I think, when he was 14 or 15 years old. It's fascinating to see a man go to such an extreme. Is he looking to pave the way? Is he looking to send a message? Is he looking to try and bring, the triple bottom line into people's consciousness? Like I said, I could go on for a while just trying to understand what his ultimate goal was. He goes back even to 2011 when it was with Patagonia's comment on Black Friday, where, instead of going out and buying new stuff, he talked about, well, repair what you have and make it last longer. I mean, this is coming from a retailer. I mean, I'm going to sense that probably went against the business plan. So, for the last 10 or 12 years, at least openly, he's been very proactive in this concept. Not sure where it's going to take us. It's going to be very interesting to see.
There are other models, of course, for giving away at least part of your profits. You've seen this countless companies, including FL, by the way. You guys do the Dragon Boat race every year. In terms of us, we model our give back on effective altruism. It's just really simple for us to do mathematically. What are some of the other models you've seen? I mean, people have foundations within their companies. People start nonprofits, a nonprofit wing of their company.
Right. And you could look at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's a whole bunch of foundations that for a particular purpose have created from wealth. This, I would say, is probably the first one I've seen that's given away the entire company. into this environment. So I'm still very curious to dig a little bit deeper and scratch beyond the surface of what this looks like, just to try and understand this whole exercise. But there's no doubt that his entire purpose was is environmental change. And as much as I like to think I'm a philanthropist, or I like to think that I'm socially conscious, I don't think I'm at the stage yet where I'm willing to give away 100% of everything at this stage. So it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. And I guess only time will tell as to whether this was a good move or a bit of a PR move.
In terms of culture, millennials, I think, and we've spoken about this in past years, expect companies to give away a little bit, give back to the planet, to their communities. And if they don't, if there's no evidence at all on a company website as far as their give back or what they're doing in terms of climate change or animal rights or just something to give back, that almost, Mike, looks suspect, I would say. If you have a website and there's no mention of good works at all, that's a red flag.
Yeah, I think in an employment market where employers need to be differentiating themselves, an employer who is not being philanthropic, is not giving back to the community, is not giving back to the environment, people are going to run. There's no doubt. Money only talks so far to a younger generation. Maybe to the older generation, if I was to weight it, it has a different weight. But certainly from the younger generation, if they can't buy into the purpose, if they can't buy into the good that you're doing, you're already discounting yourself out of half of the market, if not more. So I totally agree with you that part of this is philanthropic. Part of it is mercenary. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're not part of this environment, you're already a step behind the eight ball.
And Mike, today we're going to talk about a product category we have never really touched before, something that is pretty new just in the last few years.
Yeah, there was a radio show at the end of last year where you brought up AI and asked my opinion, and I floundered like a fish out of water. So I'm going to do my best to walk through this one and make it sound like I have some idea what I'm talking about. But just for those listeners that are not necessarily familiar with AI, we are going to bring it down to a level during this conversation so that everybody kind of gets a feeling of what we're talking about. We won't get too technical with everyone.
So it is AI. It's a chatbot for retail stores. It's called Heyday, and they were recently acquired by HootSuite, Montreal-based social media management company. The co-founder and CMO of Heyday is Étienne Mérineau. He joins us today. Hello, Etienne.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me today.
Our pleasure. So first question is the simplest. You can probably explain it better than we can. What is Heyday?
Yeah, it's actually a loaded question, right? Well, I like to, I think technology is a mean to an end, not an end to itself. So I like to almost not talk about AI, but we're a customer messaging platform. So we help businesses and customers to connect better online. And what that means in this day and age is in a more conversational fashion, right? People love to use messaging to chat with their friends, with their family, with their coworkers nowadays. So why not being able to message businesses, right? To ask questions off the cuff, in a synchronous manner instead of waiting on the line, on the phone, or for an email for an answer. And so that's really like a one-stop shop customer messaging platform, web and social. And we use AI more in a way to grease the wheel. So as a first line of defense, right? So it's the first line of defense to automate sales and support questions. And that chatbot can be kind of your employee of the month, 24/7 available, a little bit like the self-checkout lane at the grocery store. So customers get the two options.
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of people, as soon as you go to a website, it's, many retail websites, right away pops up in the bottom right corner, usually of your screen is the chatbot, and for some people, you can see that, certainly the younger generation just automatic go into it. For a lot of people, I think they think that this has got a person behind it at the initial levels. Maybe describe a little bit the filtering process that goes on through the chatbot on in a lot of these customer care sites.
Yeah, I think it's really important also for the chatbot to be straightforward, that it's a chatbot. Like too many AI assistants or chatbots, again, like it's kind of a loaded words because there are some chatbots that are rule-based, so there's not much intelligence. It's just kind of like question and answer. In our case, we use natural language processing to understand queries and kind of like dissect them and get the intent behind it. So that's kind of like a separate conversation, I guess, but it's a wide spectrum of solutions. But it's very key for whatever, even if it's a basic chatbot or more advanced chatbot, to be honest about it, to be transparent that, hey, I'm a virtual assistant. I can help you with ABC, can help you with tracking order or finding a product, but you can always have a human in the loop if you would rather talk to a human. And that usually creates that hybrid, mechanism or solution creates a more desirable outcome for customers. Because if you're left alone with a chatbot, I'm sure you've lived it as a customer, you might get frustrated depending on the level of intelligence. So again, I use the grocery store analogy. If you'd rather pay with a human cashier, good old fashioned, that's fair enough, And if you'd rather go the speedy route or on the self checkout lane, you can do that. So it gives flexibility both for the business and the customer.
I would lie if I said I haven't been frustrated on the phone too. So, I take it all in stride at the end of the day. The use of social media and the messaging platforms have skyrocketed since the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, we saw so many changes to the consumer habits during the pandemic. Some of the numbers I'm seeing, somewhere between 40 to 50% of social media users are expecting a reply within 60 minutes of hopping on a website or asking a question. I mean, the reality is that timing is astronomically cut from where we used to be. Is any of this possible without AI? Is there any way that you can provide as a retailer or a service provider anywhere close to the kind of service that you're getting, at least with the initial concept of AI?
Well, I think it's impossible, right? Without breaking the bank, because here's the thing, like customers have expectations that are higher than ever. I mean, nowadays, like even if you're a grocery store, a bookshop or, a retail store, anything in between, you're compared to, the experience you get with Amazon, same day shipping, instant convenience, the same as Uber, right? Like you tap on a button and you get a private chauffeur to your doorstep. So these technology companies really kind of raise the bar for everyone. And the expectation now is no longer, 9 to 5, it's 24/7. You need as a business to be available to show up for your customers where they are. And that means increasingly, to your point, on social. That's where we spend the bulk of our time. I like to say that social is a new interface of the internet. That's where you kind of start and end your journey. So if as a brand, as a business, if you're not there, you're not in the game. But then to your point, there's a staffing issue, especially in this economy, right? So AI is not perfect. AI is a tool, but AI is good enough for redundancies, for repetitive questions, for simple tasks, right? And that's where, and that's usually like the good old Pareto, 80-20 rule, right? 80% of queries are fairly simple. So it's convenient to have AI both for the business for cost reduction, also for always on availability, but it's also useful for customers who are, I'm sure you're like me, like we're more impatient than ever online. I want the answer right away, or I'm going to take my wallet, my business somewhere else. And so that's pretty critical just in terms of lead capture and servicing.
So you guys are a social media management company, right? I mean, at the end of the day, not everybody's going to see the work you're doing. They're going to see the product of the work, because you're doing a lot of work for some very, very high level, iconic brands like Lacoste, Decathlon, Cirque, Soleil. There's a whole bunch of companies in there. How do you work with these companies, and how do you shift people to using the chatbots, especially the older category? Are you part of this conversion of the individual, or is that left up to the retailers themselves to push them in that direction?
Well, yeah, we're not just social, we're omni-channel digital, so website plus social. But yeah, I think, what happens is that these brands use the AI first and foremost, usually it starts as a cost reduction tool, just to automate, let's say, like order tracking, right? And then they realize that customers start asking questions about product, like in the pre-purchase phase of the customer journey. So that's where we connect with what we call human in the loop. So either an online advisor or someone, at the Decathlon or Lacoste store, in store with our mobile app, who can pick up the call in a way, pick up the conversation and start selling from a distance, which was pretty useful during the pandemic, as you can imagine. So that's really kind of like it's hybrid, not just AI plus human, but it's hybrid also sales and support. It's not just customer service.
Right. And the evolution of all of this, you go back to when we first started to use websites, and our only interaction was whatever information we could find on the website. Right now, you're in a situation where you're personalizing the experience, as opposed to everybody going to the same website. Now through AI, you're personalizing my experience or your experience as you go in. Is there a continued evolution beyond this, or is this really as far as you think it's going to go for the next little while?
Well, again, I think technology kind of like leaps forward every 5-10 years or so. The problem with AI is the problem of data sets, right? It's not the technology in itself, it's the training, it's the data set available behind it. So for AI to really kind of replace customer service agents and or, salespeople, it would need to really learn from thousands, if not, millions of hours of these kind of interactions. Our play, at least at Heyday, is not to replace humans, it's to enhance them. So it's really to keep the human for, you talked about personalization or sometimes more sensitive conversations, right? More complex situations. So I think the best of both worlds is really when you combine, again, power of AI is the scale, is the automation, is the always on availability. And the power of the human is the emotional intelligence, is the personalization. It's the white glove service, right?
And obviously a lot of AI, Etienne, in everything that you do on a regular basis. I mean, it's so baked into your company. It's almost, it's part of everything, right? It's all encompassing. Do you guys have any internal guidelines or rules in terms of AI ethics? Montreal is home to a big AI ethics community. What are your thoughts in terms of what's too far? What would be too creepy or a little too invasive for the AI?
Yeah, that's a complex question, but I think in simple terms, number one, like you need as a business to be compliant with GDPR, and we're in Europe a lot, so definitely we tailor to local regulations, and we try to go above and beyond. Like we're ISO 27001 certified, stuff like that. So that's the data privacy part. But I think, and what that means is that we anonymize all the customer data. So that's kind of step number one, is to keep things anonymized, not labeled, attached to a name. And in terms of ethics, I think, this technology, especially, I won't talk about AI in general, but I'll talk about AI in the context of, customer service and, customer journey online. It needs to be assistive, not interruptive, right? And so always at the service and on demand, but not, interrupting or kind of taking liberties and, trying to figuring out who you are as a person or going on a open chat about something. It's really about more like kind of answering your questions and more of an opt-in fashion. And that's where we've seen sometimes in terms of like marketing ethics, especially in the early days, you would have like chatbots kind of retargeting people in the middle of the night, like on Messenger out of nowhere without really opting in. And then you're like, well, this is just spam, right? So we need to avoid turning messaging inboxes, like messaging app inboxes, into our actual email inboxes filled with brands and like spammers and all this stuff. That I think that's really like step number one. And in terms of AI, well, that's the thing. It's keeping AI as a tool, not as a human replacement. It's keeping it just to manage the redundancies, the robot work that I like to call.
So let's take a look behind the scenes. Obviously, a good company doing what you're doing in the chatbot AI world has people, right? I mean, this is not one big computer behind the scene here that's managing everything, contrary to what a lot of people think. You're a tech company, right? So yeah. When you look at this, and we'll get into this a little bit later with Mia Barouki who's coming on, but acquiring people in the world that we're living in right now, we know that this is a problem everywhere. Are you guys battling, or are you guys sitting in such a sweet spot that that people are coming to you? How do you see the employment market right now in the tech industry?
Yeah, it's definitely competitive, and it's also post COVID, it's a global market, meaning that most of the jobs, especially for engineers and developers, it's remote first or remote friendly. So that means that your pool of talent is wider, but your competition as well, right? Right. It's 10x the pool of talent, but it's probably 100x the competition. That said, we're fortunate enough that we started out of Montreal. Obviously, we're based in Montreal, and the AI office of HootSuite, and Heyday is a Montreal-based company. So Montreal is really kind of in a good position globally in terms of AI talent, huge and deep pool, especially per capita. Let's put it this way. So we were fortunate enough in that sense. And the other thing too is, being, you saw, I mean, my name is Étienne Mérineau, right? So you can imagine it's a French Canadian, it's a Quebecois name. Being French Canadian, my three co-founders are French Canadian as well. We started working with French speaking and obviously national brands in Canada. We need to be bilingual by design. And then we started export. Usually startups export more in the US first. We started exporting more in France first, because of that French factor that differentiated us out of the gate. And the European market is a bit more, not bilingual. I'd say like multiple languages are required to service customers. But that was kind of part of our initial edge. It's not just an English speaking or an English text AI. It's really a multilingual one. So I would say that because of that multilingual aspect and the local specificities of French language and all that, we were able to attract local talent because, again, Quebec born and based engineers, they tend to care about that stuff, right? So locally, that gives us an edge as well. So the deep talent pool, but also I think the focus of the company being a multilingual, diverse company really helped us attract cutting edge talent from local universities and beyond.
One question about language. We know that sort of on an individual basis, French can be tougher to learn than English. In coding, is it tougher as well? And is that why you decided to start with French? Because to prove yourself in a way? And is that part of the challenge as well, to start with a tougher language?
Yeah, well, I would say, obviously like the code is a universal language, but to apply it, the interface becomes language, right? It's linguistics, right? So understanding French, to your point, not only it's probably a more complex and nuanced language sometimes than English, but when it starts, we're mostly dealing with obviously messaging. So texting, you can imagine, especially at a local level, the slang, right? The Franglish. And then when you start exporting in France, well, the French have their own Franglish, their own brand, own flavor of Franglish. So all these local specificities, these different brands of French are needed to be factored in. And yes, we kind of did it naturally because of the nature of our market. When you start dealing with, at first we were in retail specific, we were kind of like figuring ourselves out. And one of our customers was the government of Canada, the Ministry of Public Health. Obviously the government of Canada needs like stellar bilingual, technology solutions. So it just pushed us to kind of go down that path naturally because of the local specificities. And then down the road, it gave us an edge when we started competing globally. For example, a brand like Lacoste, well, it kind of helped us to be francophones because at the end of the day, the decisions are made in Paris.
Let's switch gears a little bit and go to I guess it's a recent acquisition by HootSuite of Heyday, going back, I guess, in the summer of 2021. How did this come about? I mean, you're a local Montreal company. You've got a certain environment that you're used to. What prompts the move into a bigger organization?
Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try to make it short, but essentially you need to kind of go back. It was a different world a year ago, right? Cash was cheap. Interest rates were really low. It was also kind of like the end of a cycle for the tech industry. Like it's been, again, like if you look at the macroeconomics, a 10-year almost bull market, more or less. COVID was a bit of a little bump in the road of like 2 months. But then what happened with all the cash injection in the economy by the governments, it really enabled businesses to reinvest in their growth. And as a result, you see me coming, acquisitions, right? That gave most tech companies, the bigger players at least, a bigger capacity to either raise money or get debt to make these acquisitions and grow. So it was kind of the perfect storm where there was a lot of consolidation in the market, technology market at a broader level, but also in the customer messaging, conversational AI, chatbot space. I mean, one of our competitors in the US, Customer, was acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. So that really kind of was the first domino, but it was a big splashy news. And then we started getting a lot of inbound, like getting LinkedIn messages and emails from prospective acquirers. At the time we were in for sale, obviously, we were still a young company and we had our best year. So it was kind of the perfect storm, and like the stars aligned where we tripled revenue. COVID kind of helped us in our case because it accelerated digital transformation and the need for brands to, again, service their customers online on all channels. So for us, it created a need. We went from, nice to have technology to must have overnight. And yeah, so, growing sales, we're about to raise a Series A of funding. So that would have been our second round. We had just secured a bridge financing round. So we still had like roughly I'd say 4 million of runway. So we're forced to do the move, but we listened a little bit. And then HootSuite knocked on our door, and HootSuite is based out of Vancouver, right? So fellow Canadian company. Social media, we were more like messaging focused, so more like private social, but very complementary on paper. And I like to say, like, when you consider an M&A, like a merger and acquisition play, my methodology was focused around the 3 V's, right? Vision, values, and valuation. So once you align on these 3, well, you sort of have a deal. And it was very natural to align with HootSuite on vision and values. And then valuation, obviously it's a negotiation game. Like we went through the whole rodeo where we had a banker and lawyers, and we negotiated for months. It was an interesting ride, and it went smoothly. Also, like these negotiations can turn sour, but it went very smoothly. So for us, it was kind of like inflection point, right? For how long will this economic boom last? Will it be harder to raise money post, bull market, post this run. And you kind of need as a startup to be very self-aware, and as an entrepreneur to be like, okay, do I have the means? Do I have the ambition? Do I have the team? Do I have like all the kind of like key variables to go at it for another 5 to 7 years? Because if we don't take that window of opportunity, then it means we raise money. Then we're kind of moving the touchdown zone, like the end goal, right? Where the new investors want to have a higher return on their money. So you need to make a decision. And yeah, it was just kind of like a fit that was too good to pass on. At the end of the day, that's really the story.
Étienne Mérineau, very impressive. And we're going to have your one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs in a few minutes. But first, speaking of tech, Mike, the competition in the tech industry in Montreal is so fierce. I mean, companies really have to go the extra mile to attract and retain talent. And with us now is Mia Barouki. She is a senior advisor with human resources at FL and their sister company PVisio. So Mia advises a lot of startups on this very issue. Welcome to the show, Mia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Mike, yeah, as I mentioned, just a really, really competitive environment here in Montreal in particular in this one sector.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, we could take a whole show on the discussion of talent and attracting talent based on the world we're living in right now. But we're going to kind of narrow it down today and try and get into, how do you be competitive in attracting candidates, especially in the tech industry, where we're just, Montreal is a hotbed for technology companies and something to be proud of. It also means that there's a huge, huge battle for talent. How do you help clients do that?
Yeah, very good question. I think that in today's world, especially in the tech industry, outstanding talents won't actively be applying for jobs. So, and the main reason is I think that they don't need to, because they're approached on the daily with tons and tons and tons of great opportunities. So aside from approaching them as well and reaching out with all the benefits you offer and what a great company you have, the best thing an HR department can do is really work on their great culture and showcase it. So whether you're doing it through social media platforms like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, networking events, the best way, in my opinion, is really to do it through your own employees. So what I mean by that is, if you really do have a great culture, and when I say great culture, I don't say great benefits, potlucks, bake sales. I mean a healthy working environment, good relationships with your managers, flexibility, and inclusive cultures, career development, and all that stuff. Your employees will become your ambassadors. Okay, so once they become your ambassadors, they'll speak highly of the organization to their friends, to their families, to their to people they went to school with. So anybody that approaches them asking how's your job, they'll say good things about it, and that will indirectly attract candidates towards your company.
So culture is a word right now, I think, that is in everything that we're reading and everything we're seeing from an HR perspective. And no doubt that the pandemic has accelerated certain culture issues that we were pushing and kicking the can down the road on. But in a multi-generational environment, culture is very complicated right now. Dealing in the tech world, where everybody's a little bit closer in age, is that easier to help clients maintain and build that culture, or is it equally challenging in that environment?
I think it's equally as challenging because even if you're in the same age group, if you have something that's offered to you, if you're looking at flexibility, people tend to be attracted by that also. No matter what generation you're from, if you see flexibility, if you see someone that supports you with your mental health and whatnot, it's attractive no matter which age group you're part of and what generation you're part of.
So that engagement and engaging culture obviously has a direct impact on retention rates.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to bring it back a bit to I'm sure you've heard of it, the terms quiet quitting and the great resignation. Well, if you haven't, just quickly, I'm gonna define them for you. Great resignation is, we've seen it through the pandemic. It's when you're having more employees resign than what you can hire. Okay, and that was triggered by the pandemic. And on the other hand, quiet quitting is when your employees are still with you, but they're not going above and beyond to improve or to perform. They're doing just the bare minimum. Okay. And that impacts motivation and performance. And what we want to do is try to work on that, to work on not being impacted by the great resignation and the quiet quitting that are trending right now to retain talent? And how do we minimize that impact? So again, we're going back to the culture. So to retain, you need to work on your culture. And to work on your culture, I think that mainly you have to research trends. You have to be up to date, like we were saying before, whether it's Gen Y, X, Z, and subscribe to newsletters, competitors' newsletter, business articles. The best and strong tool, in my opinion, is pulse interviews. Really questions your team members, see what they like, and then work on that. So assess their
So this culture starts at the top, right? So this is a top-down discussion, and you're talking with people who may be a little bit longer in a certain position. You may be seeing them doing things that they've been doing for 10 years, 20 years. How are you helping managers adapt to these trends and policies that you're talking about? I mean, not only are they constantly changing, and not only is the finish line in culture continuing to move, how are you helping these people who may have been doing and managing for the same way for 20 years all of a sudden adapt?
Mm-hmm. So I'm a strong believer of knowledge transfer and coaching. So I think that coaching would have to be the main way to help managers in any scenario, whether it's through managerial training programs, workshops, one-on-one coaching. And I think that communication is key in that case, like keeping them up to date of the changes that are coming. If you're implementing a new policy, if you're thinking of changing something, keeping the communication open is key. And make sure your HR department is always accessible, is always present, is always in their face, in the sense of like they're present and they're there to help if they need to.
Mia Barouki, Senior Advisor of Human Resources at FL's sister company, PVisio. Thanks, Mia.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And as we usually do at the end of our show, we'll turn to our guest and ask him for his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs. And Étienne Mérineau, co-founder of Heyday, what are your thoughts? What are your inspiring words?
Well, I mean, there's so many like learnings through the journey, right? I think you're probably going to be surprised by this, but I think my piece of advice was just survive another day, right? The path to success is actually much less glamorous and sexy than it sounds. And it's actually a game of survival. I mean, when all the headwinds are gone and the quitters have quit, those who kept on battling and keeping the lights open while, the storm was raining, those who survive another day, the cockroaches, I like to call them, those survivors get to eat the cake and serve the tailwinds. And startups in a way are like 100% business Darwinism, right? So it's truly the survival of the fittest, but I would say of the most resilient. At Heyday, we were an underdog. Like we were bootstrap, first-time founders. Like truthfully, we didn't really know what we were doing for the most part, especially at the beginning. But one thing that I really appreciated from our team is we never quit, and we just kept battling, and we just kept pivoting, finding solutions, and just staying in the game. And that's really my advice: just stay in the game another day, another week. Sometimes, like even when all hell breaks loose, like I remember having kind of like panic attacks, and then the week after, you feel like you hit rock bottom, but the week after there's a major unlock, there's a major meeting, and there's something that just gives you a new kind of breath of fresh air and keeps you going. And it's a domino effect. So keep at it. Outwork your competition. Showing up is really, really more than half the work. And at some point the tide will turn, right? It's like, I'm a hockey fan. So it's like when a scorer has a hard time scoring, just go in front of the net. At some point, the puck will hit you. Maybe you'll score with your head, your hip, whatever. It won't be a sexy goal, but it'll be a goal, and it'll give you momentum in your team to you and your team. And that's kind of how you come out at the end of the tunnel. There are like 30 companies in your space. Then there are 3 survivors, and then these 3 survivors that divide the pie, right? So I always felt like, we were surviving and almost dying every week. And then all of a sudden we got acquired for 60 million. Like if you ask my wife, every week I would say, I don't know if this thing's going to turn out. I was really managing expectations for myself and her. It's true. You feel like you're going to die every day. So just stay in the game. As simple as that.
Dan, I see a book title in that one, The Path to Success, Surviving the Battle of Attrition.
Hey, it's rough out there, especially in tech, but Etienne, you're a survivor, and thank you for your time. And thanks for also mentioning human in the loop, by the way, because it's nice to have someone thinking of humans in tech as well. Appreciate that.
Well, you can't replace humans, that's for sure.
Étienne Mérineau, Heyday. A reminder, you can subscribe to Inspiring Entrepreneurs Montreal as a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or your favorite platform. And you can also log on to the website, inspiringentrepreneursmtl.com, for hundreds of local entrepreneur profiles. See you back here next week. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dan.
KR Media. Good talk.